Hello. I'm going to talk about the problem with rules, how we have to be careful with rules, especially with kids, big kids like myself and little kids like my new grandchild. And my 2-year-old one too. I have two now. One is little Zoe, about 3 weeks old, and the other one is Moksha, and he's about 2 years old. So thinking about how to raise them, it's important to think about, how the values they grew up with. And, as a monastic, of course, I was a fully ordained bhikshu, and I had to take 250 or so vows, 252 or something, and all the bodhisattva precepts and so forth. So there's lots of rules. I know something about rules. We lived in a very strict monastery. I slept sitting up for 13 years and ate once a day, and I still do actually that one because I like it. But knowing a little bit about rules, I know the dangers of rules, whether one's a monastic or just a householder, a layperson following rules, or a parent raising a child. And one of the biggest problem is attaching to rules. And for a young child, we talk about tenets. Buddhist is a tenet system. That means that there's a lot of regulations considering conduct and so forth. But Buddhism also speaks very broadly about avoiding attachment to dharmas. They are constructed after all. And I'm going to talk from the point of view of, rather than talk from the point of view of a monastic, I'll talk from the point of view of a young child, like my grandchildren, and raising them. And by extension, it applies to everyone that wants to, in the world, follow rules of decency, honesty, and so forth. And if one is a monastic or considers themselves a Buddhist and wants to be a good Buddhist, following those rules. But let's just start using the example of a young child, like my grandchildren. So if I say to my grandchild, Moksha, don't pee on the carpet, please. Well, that's a tenet. That's a rule that he learns. And so we might think that's a great rule. Of course, conventionally, it's very handy, because you don't want to do that. House would be ruined really quickly. But the problem with that is that if you follow the rule, like the child grows up and says, well, every time he wants to pee on the carpet, he thinks, oh, mom said not to. It enforces a tenet and a wrong and a regulation. And he's doing it because he's not peeing on the carpet because he wants to follow a rule. It's all for the wrong reason. That's the problem with it. And that's the problem with all tenets that we have to be careful with. So, what is a better way? Well, the child, if you were really a clever parent, you might say, okay, Moksha, you're 2 years old now. What do you think would happen, if you peed on the carpet every day in the same place or something? Well, if he's a little bit smart, he'll think, well, it's going to smell really bad, it'll be all wet, and it won't be comfortable to sit there, and so forth. And people won't like it, the smell and the wetness on the carpet, and other people will be inconvenienced by it. And if you got the child to think about it, then it's so much better, because you're doing it for the right reason. You're restraining yourself for the right reason, consideration of others. That's the reason. So, the best way, to teach somebody a rule, a tenet, is to question them. For example, a child, if you ask that child, instead of saying, don't go into the forest, or don't go into the street, you said, what do you suppose would happen if you went into the forest? The child might think, well, maybe there'll be a bear there or something. So, or what do you think will happen if you go into the street? Well, maybe a car will come really fast and almost hit me or something, or I'll get in the way of the car. So, the child is going to follow the rule by his own reasoning. So, when you extend this out to ordinary life, we have all kinds of rules for society, not to cheat on your wife and so forth, and not to get angry at people. And as monastics, there's so many rules about sexual misconduct, taking intoxicants, and all of these things. And if they're followed as rules, it's sort of like the child peeing on the carpet for all the wrong reasons. Not peeing on the carpet for all the wrong reasons. He's doing the right action, but it's not the right reasons. He doesn't want to damage the carpet and not hurt people. That's not the reason he's doing it. He's doing it because mommy says not to. And if a person living in society doesn't commit sexual misconduct because he thinks it's a not really cool rule to follow, to break the rules, hop the fence, and get involved with neighbor's wife or something because it's not the right thing to do, it's all for the wrong reason. So as thinking people, we can have the right reason. And the right reason is that we don't want to hurt other people, of course. Like if you harm someone in any action that you do, whether it's lying, stealing, sexual misconduct, taking intoxicants, if you just don't do those things because it's a rule, it's the lowest possible reason. But if you think, like, well, if I take intoxicants, I might hurt my wife, my family. If I steal something, I'm going to hurt that person that I stole from. I'll hurt the feelings of my wife if I get involved with someone else. So those are reasons that are rooted in compassion, thinking about others. So in my own experience, talking with other masters about following a rule, I was never told to follow a rule, just to follow the rule, because that's attachment to the rule. I was always taught to, well, yeah, the rule is there, but, that's only really for non-thinking people. That I was told by every single master I've met that you don't follow rules just to keep the precepts. You think of each rule and what's involved in breaking it. And then you generate, compassion for other people. And that gives you the right reason to follow a rule. If you just keep the precepts as a monastic, that's attaching to the Dharma. You want to look at beneath the surface of the whole thing, of the rule. So, whether you're teaching a child not to pee on the carpet, or you're teaching monastics to follow 250 bhikshu precepts and require bhikshunis to hold 350 or so, roughly 100 more than the men. It's tenets, it's a tenet system. And you have to look way beyond that. If you don't get beyond that, you're just imprisoning yourself. And if a child grows up thinking he shouldn't pee on the carpet for no other reason than his parents said not to, the parents are not teaching that child to think. And in everything that the child grows up, as the child grows up, the rules should never be imposed without some kind of logical enforcement on why they're there, to not bring harm to others or oneself. Mostly in consideration to others, because we quite naturally don't want to harm ourselves. But harsh speech and so forth, which I'm very familiar with. My children always told me I was so harsh when I talk to them, because I'm like such a disciplinarian. But it's a fault, and I realize it. If I really considered better myself, like how my words hurt others, then I might not have been affected by just attaching to the tenet of the whole thing. So, whether it's right speech, right action, right mindfulness, and all of the purity of Sariputra, the noble ones. If we don't look beyond the rule, then we're fools. We're just totally fools. And the thing is that if you really understand why you're doing things, why you're restraining yourself, it's so much more enlightened. And it's so much more liberating. There's nothing liberating about following a rule. If there were, then all the people in prisons would be enlightened. So, I leave you this thought about why you shouldn't pee on the carpet. It's just not cool. Not because someone said it's not supposed to be done.